As far as the perception about America is concerned, now America is going to be heading into polls very soon. How does this paint a picture about America? How does the world now see America after this incident?
I think the world is very well aware that the United States has a violent culture. Gun violence in the United States, of course, is at a level that is unparalleled in any other developed country. Butler, Pennsylvania, in particular, is one of the highest gun ownership areas in the entire United States. Western Pennsylvania, believe it or not, the counties south and west of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania is slightly west of Pittsburgh. That area is a gun ownership hotspot. So there would have been many people in that community who owned guns, who were familiar with rifles, who knew how to operate firearms, and who spend their afternoons or evenings on the shooting range. So this was not at all atypical for America. And I think world leaders understand that the United States is a place that has historically, chronically had high levels of political violence. Now, what we can hope comes out of this is some lowering of the temperature of the rhetoric about Donald Trump being about to stage a coup or take over the government, or this election will be the last. We hear that rhetoric around the world. You yourselves have heard that rhetoric in India, that before this election, that if Narendra Modi were returned with an increased majority, it would be India's last democratic election. Well, we're used to that rhetoric in the United States as well. Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States, actually said less than a week ago that the Democratic Party had to put a bullseye on Donald Trump. Now, of course, he wasn't calling for the assassination of Donald Trump. He meant that as a metaphor. But nonetheless, Democrats will now, we hope, be very careful with that kind of language over the next few months before the election occurs.
You make a very valid point in terms of, that statement being made from the Democratic camp. So not that, because the voter doesn't forget these things. That and now this incident, does this then further weaken the Democrats heading into the elections? The first debate didn't go as per their liking either, and then these statements where when the voter looks at all of it, it further weakens the Democrats?
This certainly strengthens the Trump campaign. Now, had Donald Trump actually been assassinated, this would have been the ideal time to weaken the Republican campaign. That is, just going into the convention. Trump has not yet named a vice presidential candidate, which means that the convention would have been thrown into disarray. The fact that Donald Trump survived this assassination attempt obviously increases his political stock, will make him a figure of sympathy in the United States, but it may also, to some extent, protect the Democrats from themselves. For the last 6 months, the Democrats, and Joe Biden in particular, have really been running on a campaign of, if you don't vote for us this election, this will be the last election. And that kind of rhetoric is really, I think, discounted by the majority of the American public. No one seriously believes that if Donald Trump is elected, that will be the last election and Donald Trump will become a dictator in the United States. Well, if the Democrats are forced by this event to move away from that kind of inflammatory language and start engaging on the actual issues, it might ironically force the Democratic Party into a more successful campaign strategy. This far out, we really can't prejudge the election based on the emotions of a single day's events.
Sir, also if you could help us understand, as far as the Democrats are concerned, is this now a done deal for them? But if at all they to look forward and salvage this situation, how is it that they can possibly go ahead from here?
No election is over until the votes are counted. American elections are always on a knife's edge. A 52% victory is a runaway landslide in the United States. So no, we can't count anyone out at this point. Of course, Donald Trump has, over the past month or two, become the favorite to win the election. The Democratic Party has serious problems with questions about Joe Biden's fitness to govern. That said, things can change very rapidly in politics, and we really don't know what the future brings. We don't know what kind of campaigning the two sides will take in the final stretch to November. Surviving this assassination attempt certainly reinforces Donald Trump's image as a rebel who has taken on the establishment and survives. As someone, as he repeatedly says in his stump speeches, someone who stands between the establishment and the American people, that he is there, he's standing up for people, because if he's out of the way, the government will come for them. Now, this obviously was not a government orchestrated assassination attempt. Nonetheless, Trump's rhetoric will be strongly reinforced. That said, a lot depends on how Joe Biden reacts to this, what position he takes in 2 weeks after the Republican convention. Next week is all about Donald Trump. He's just survived an assassination attempt. He's going to name his vice presidential candidate. There's going to be the Republican National Convention. Then attention turns back to Joe Biden. And we'll see what Joe Biden does with that opportunity once it comes.
Right. I just want to point out, sir, and I need a reaction from you over there. We've heard time and time again from Donald Trump as far as his gun control policy is concerned. Now, does this incident change things for Donald Trump as far as his outlook towards the gun policy is concerned?
Absolutely not. The gun control rhetoric in the United States is thoroughly partisan, and the Republican Party will not see this in terms of too many people owning guns. If nothing else, you may hear Republicans saying you should be allowed to bring guns to Trump rallies because some of the people in the audience saw the shooter before the police saw him, and they could have shot the shooter first. And that's the rhetoric we hear, for example, whenever there's a school shooting. When there's a school shooting in the United States, Democrats tend to say, this is evidence that we need more gun control. Republicans tend to say this is evidence that teachers should be carrying firearms. So no, this assassination attempt will have no effect whatsoever on the gun control debate in the United States.
Okay. But the other thing...
that's the one thing I can tell you for certain out of all of this.
It's baffling, counterintuitive, and I'm just running short of words if that's the narrative. But the other thing that I want to ask you over here is, how does the American media look at this? The New York Times, CNN said that, he's fallen out. There are loud cheers. There were loud sounds, in fact, at his rally. What does this tell you about American media and its coverage of this incident?
The media has become, in effect, propagandists, and I don't say that lightly. The fact is that until 1 hour ago, the New York Times was still reporting that this was a quote-unquote possible assassination attempt on Donald Trump, as if it were even theoretically conceivable that the shooter actually wanted to kill the woman behind Trump and just accidentally grazed his ear while doing so. I mean, this was obviously an assassination attempt. It was obvious to everybody except the editors at the New York Times, who have now updated their headline to call it an assassination attempt. This kind of hyper-partisan reporting is simply embarrassing. It's embarrassing because you're trying to convince people of something when everybody knows and everybody is going to find out the truth. There's no point to trying to massage the truth on such a high-profile event as this. However, it does illustrate what happens further down the line in the news reporting. So something like this, everyone is going to learn the truth very quickly. But what about a page 5 item or a page 8 item? Something that's not so particularly newsworthy. Well, then the obfuscatory headline will have the effect of shaping people's impressions. They're unlikely to hear follow-up coverage on the event, with the result that American newspapers and news channels are in effect, not even misinforming, they're actively disinforming their readers and viewers. I myself watched Gaurav Sawant on India Today reporting from Ukraine during the Russian invasion because I couldn't trust the objectivity of American news organizations. It's very sad that our news infrastructure has got to this point. But that's the reality. And it's not only the reality on the establishment Democratic side of the news. A mirror image reality occurs on the Republican side. It's a much smaller component of the American news landscape, but nonetheless equally partisan.
Right.